So here we are in part two. And part two, I'm going to show you exactly how we work with our NoviChi system. And I'm going to talk about one of our elemental issues. And I'm going to talk about grief and how that stores in our lungs. And we're going to talk about that. And it's pretty universal. I think that we have all experienced loss. Every one of us have experienced loss, and some of us have experienced a lot of loss. And I know that this time of year, sometimes at Christmas time, we have those empty places at our dinner table, or we have our first Christmas without somebody, or our 10th Christmas, or in my case, our 18th Christmas without someone that is near and dear to us. And so we all experience this feeling of grief and this feeling of loss. And so where that particular emotion lands in our body is in our lungs. And so a lot of times if we're having a hard time breathing, if we feel like we can't catch our breath, if we feel like I just can't get enough air, a lot of times it's about grief and depression, okay? So I want you to think about that, and I want you to just kind of give you an overview, a very brief overview of how this works. So this is our device, right? This is the NoviChi device, and you can see it has a light on the end of it. It has a sticker right here, and underneath the sticker is a coil that radiates a perfect sine wave. And so we use, the base of that is sound that we have converted from a digital frequency to an analog frequency, which has made it a perfect, harmless sine wave, okay? This perfectly harmless sine wave is exactly how our body emits frequency. And so to project an electromagnetic frequency in the form of a perfect sine wave based on pure sound or harmonics is very, very bioavailable to our body, and our body absolutely loves it. So that's what we use with NoviChi. We use light that comes from the tip, and we use the sound that comes out here and radiates out this way. And so with our mind protocols, it is mostly light. And we're going to be placing that light on visual, auditory, and kinesthetic points to diffuse the emotion out of the body. Now, what you have to know is that when you have diffused an emotion, you have actually uncoupled it. You've uncoupled it from the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic feelings. You cannot get the same stress response. You cannot run that anymore in the same way. You cannot have the same triggers that keep you cycling in those emotions. And so this is a super, super powerful tool that works better than anything else. I mean, trust me, believe me, I have been a healer for 45 years. Yes, since I was 20, so do the math. And I can tell you that this particular state-of-the-art NoviChi device goes farther, faster, and more complete than anything else out there. So I know that some of the things are less expensive, but they're not nearly as effective. And so and there's a whole story that I'm not going to go into right now, but when this was discovered, when I literally was working on a veteran and discovered the power of the light and was able to duplicate that into our system, I can honestly tell you that I was overjoyed. I had tears. I was so excited because I knew that something really absolutely wonderful had been brought to our planet, and that I got to be I got to participate in it. And that was just so humbling and so sweet. And I would be forever grateful. So that's what we have here, is we have an incredible tool. And so I'm going to show you how it works. And I'm going to go to the software, which is very, very simple. And I'm not going to really go into that today because it's just too hard for me to do the video by myself and keep the keep my focus and keep turning the computer around, or keep me turning around. And so I just want to have full on and show you with the device what we're doing. So this particular frequency that I'm going to show you here is actually a sound frequency. And when we push start with the sound frequency, it actually will show us that now we have sound penetrating out of this, and that the green light, it's a scintillating green light. It will tell us that it's functioning, it's working, and that we can use it. And the software tells us to put it on our chakra 5, which is our metal element chakra. You can see we are using traditional Chinese medicine, but we're also using ancient Ayurvedic medicine. And there's a place in our system where we will use actually ancient Egyptian medicine with the technology, state-of-the-art technology that is absolutely phenomenal. So as I hold this on my corresponding chakra to my lungs and my large intestine, which is my metal element, and as I hold it here, then the emotions, whatever they are, the sadness, grief, sorrow, whatever I'm storing in there in the form of depression, will begin to surface. And it will surface because it knows I'm asking for it to do that. And so, you know, I've used a frequency, sound frequency, to get that to pull up and out. And so this particular frequency will bring those issues that are stored in the tissues, in this case of my lungs. All right. I'm clearing my throat, aren't I? Okay, so that's the first step, is the grief detox. And that is the first step to the emotional clearing. The second step is the visual. And I'll click on start, and you'll see a pulsating multicolored light that is designed to literally break up the visual memories. Okay, so I'm going to place this on my visual screen, or my third eye, where it is at my imagination, my memory. It's my visual screen where I can actually visualize the things that I feel grief about, the things that I feel sad about. And so when I'm using this, I will close my eyes down, and I will allow each one of those pictures to come up one at a time. I will hold the light. And it's so interesting because the pictures just begin to dissolve. They just sort of uncouple, they just dissolve, melt into oblivion, and I can't think of them right off the bat. I mean, it's like the whole issue around the grief is actually dissipating out of my mind and hence out of my body. Okay, so the first step is the visual. The second step is the auditory. Okay, this is also a 10-minute frequency, and you can push start again if you need to, but I'm placing light frequency in my left ear where I hold memories of the sounds around the grief. So the sounds around grief could be crying, they could be It could be screaming. If you've had some major trauma around grief, you know that the sounds that you heard or maybe come out of your own body that were very alarming. But this is the sounds, breaking up the sounds around the grief, the sorrow, the sadness, okay? And the same way that the pictures dissolve, the sounds will dissolve. And so you just keep this going until your mind goes to silence. And when it goes to silence, you know that you're ready to go to the next page. Now it's interesting because the visual and the auditory can certainly keep your mind circling back to the grief. And so it's really important that you take your time and you allow every picture and every sound to come up during these first 2 pages. The next page is about where do I store this sadness and this grief in my body? Okay, if you are body aware and you can feel it, then you can put the light right on it. If you are not body aware and you can't feel it in your body, you don't know, then you can use the software to tell you to put it on your left stomach 2 point. Now the left stomach 2 point is a great access point. It's an amazing access point to the gateway to your grief. Okay, so this is the next step, is we're going through the emotions that we've stored and where do we feel them in our body around this grief. We're feeling sadness right now, and where do we feel it? Okay, and then once we get through the sadness, the next emotion that the program tells us to feel is the guilt and shame. Do you have any guilt and shame around your grief? Is there something that you feel like you could have done? Is there something that you feel like you could have changed it? Is there something that you regret? And wherever it is you feel those regrets or those guilt or that shame, then you put that directly on your body, or you can place it back here on the stomach 2 point to access the guilt and the shame. Okay, so that is the emotion of guilt and shame dissipating out of your body. And you will literally feel that break up and move out of your body. It is the most amazing physical and emotional experience combined. The next emotion that we're going to diffuse is anger and resentment. And so again, we push our start button, we get our light flashing, and we say, where do I feel this anger in my body? And if, again, we're body aware, we put it directly on our body, and if we're not, we'll put it on our chakra 3, okay? Right at our solar plexus, and we'll allow the light to penetrate that chakra and to diffuse the anger and the resentment around the grief. Maybe we feel angry. Maybe we feel angry with God. Maybe we feel angry with someone else that we're holding responsible for our grief. Maybe there's just so much there. But this will diffuse the anger so that we can breathe, so that we can feel again, so that we can release this deep, deep depression and feel some happiness. Okay? So that is the point for anger and resentment. It is also the point if there's any hatred. It is also the point for disappointment, and the point for jealousy. So this point can cover a scope of emotions, is what I'm saying. The feeling of disgust is also here. A bitterness, okay? So these are real guttural feelings. These are real body feelings that exist. And this is a really good access point to release those and to diffuse those out of our body. Now, why would we want to? Why would we want to diffuse all of this out of our body? Why? Because number one, we don't want to run that energy. We don't want to project it onto other people. We don't want to beat other people up with our stuff. That's number one. Number two would be we want to be healthy. We want to feel the life force come back into our body. We want to be able to feel neutral or happy even. How would that be? Okay. And sometimes we have what I call where we feel like if we're not feeling the grief, we'll forget the person that we're grieving over. And that just can't happen. We'll never forget that person. So we need to release the grief and to be able to move forward in our life, right? So the next emotion that the software asks us to bring up is our fear and anxiety around the grief. Now remember that fear and anxiety is always out in the future, okay? So if we're having fear and anxiety around our grief, we're projecting our past grief into our future. We're afraid of having a similar event in our future. And so literally when we clear out the fear and anxiety, and there might even be, oops, I didn't turn it on. There might even be some pictures associated with that our imagination is putting out into the future. And if that's the case, we can certainly put that on our visual screen, right? Then we can come back here to our gateway point for our anxiety and our fear. Or if we can feel it in our body, where we held it in our body, we can just go directly to wherever it is we feel the fear and anxiety in our body. Okay? All right. So the next thing our software guides us through on this fear and anxiety protocol is a actual frequency, a neurochemistry place in our brain on our gallbladder 18 point, and it's up here on our crown, and it shows you exactly where to place the light. Again, it's a different light pattern, but it's to stimulate and activate the glutamate in the brain, which is our everything's okay frequency of our brain. It's our neurotransmitter that says, don't worry, be happy, okay? And so we've put this right here into this particular protocol to actually wake up the brain chemistry that's probably been dormant as you've been grieving. And we're going to have you do it on both sides of your brain. Okay, both of these gateway points into that neurochemistry, right? Isn't that cool? Isn't that really fun? We have a whole brain chemistry support protocol that is also included with the Rise Up program. Okay, and then our very last frequency is our ground. And we could put that down here, just below our belly button, or if we're sitting down, we can put it between our legs. And that will actually pull our energy back into our body, because if we're in grief, typically we're not fully in our body. We're usually disassociated. We usually have the PTSD, somewhere on the spectrum of PTSD, where we are disassociated, where we are not really all the way participating in life. We're preoccupied with our grief and we're disassociated from the everyday life. And so we want to ground, we want to pull ourselves back in, and we want to be in our body so that we can experience life. Okay? So thank you for watching this part 2 of our Rise Up introductory video series, and stay tuned for part 3. Thank you so much.